Welcome to Conversations for Our Time with the Quiet Sun team, John and George. And this is podcast number 26, which is really cool. And this is part of the Regenerative Living series, mini-series. It's part 16 of that. And it's the second half of our conversation regarding natural law, and with other interpretations. So, it was a really good conversation last week, sorry. I can't remember the day we did it, but and it kind of reminded me, having the talk reminded me about my practice in Buddhism and how it's kind of developed from this kind of theoretical practice. At the start of my Buddhist studies, I was reading a lot, like, wow, hours a day, as well as chanting and doing other things to do with it. But it was really about understanding the principles of Buddhism, the laws that the Buddha saw and were kind of then developed by other Buddhist priests, etc. Because the Lotus Sutras, or the sutras in general, have been added to, I suppose, or refined to mean other things. And I mean, George will kind of run this in parallel with natural law. There are principles of natural law. So it's a wild thing to engage in your life, this practice of trying to understand the way the universe functions. And the interesting thing is, obviously, all religions have tried to, or have, their own interpretation of the way the universe works, and they've all very different. But the fundamentals of them are pretty much the same. Some are very much more eloquently, explain how these things work. And some have these beautiful stories. Some have turned into be more dogmatic. And the reason I'm saying this is because, in essence, God or Christ consciousness, the Buddha, natural law, they're all trying to say the same thing. And the reason I'm saying this, and the reason this, is because, really, when you get to the core of it, when you meet someone who is, say they take Christianity as faith, I've met people who are literally, their life is just brimming with joy, and people like Ram Dass, for instance, who me and George listened to, he referred to multiple different practicing religions for these very wise, encouragements from the past. So I just wanted to kind of say that because it's important that we kind of have this overall understanding, because it's, rather than dividing, I think it's important to unite, so there's amazing principles of Buddhism, such as natural law. And one of the principles in Buddhism is, well, there's many, but there's a thing called the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. It's a bit of a mouthful. In Japanese, it's Ichinin Sanzen. And it means that there are all these, there are so many possibilities in one moment that can spring from a moment of consciousness, that you are the actor, the director, everything of your life. And if you understand how these principles work, like cause and effect, which both Buddhism and natural law share as a principle, when you understand it at that level, you can start to really live it in your life, because you realize that when you do something, it has a reaction to it. The universe reacts in a particular way, and whether that's a person or whether it's a situation, there's always this balancing act going on within the universe. And in human lives, it operates in a very, fundamental level, because it actually, every action you have affects something else. And, it's like this kind of crazy dance that's happening. So, yeah, really interesting stuff. And I've been thinking about it all for the last week. So we'll start, and I'd like George to kind of share these principles, and whatever else he feels comfortable doing. So hello, George, and say hello to the people out there.
Cheers, John. It's all great. Yeah, great intro. Thank you very much. I'm comfortable. That's the great thing about me. I'm comfortable to talk about absolutely anything. There's no barriers with me, because it's all relevant. Like we were talking earlier, it's all relevant today. It has to be all talked about, because it's there to empower people. Because there's no doubt that we are under, a lot of control by those in power, and we need to empower ourselves and take back all of this to where we stand. But yeah, absolutely what you're saying is, at the end of the day, life is about joy. And there's a hell of a lot of people, unfortunately, they're really suffering in this world. And the bulk of that reason why is we don't really know who we are, and we feel very disconnected from ourselves and nature, and people can get sometimes a bit fed up on mundane lives. But we are 100% our own creators of our own reality. And the knowledge that we've been talking about, it has been very, very well hidden. Of course it would be, because those in power want to, they want power, and they have basically the whole world working for them, and it should never be that way. But the point is to get this knowledge and have that power and understand human consciousness and how we make that reality, to bring back and take away the suffering and bring back the joy in our lives, because it's all to do with human consciousness, because consciousness is who we are. And there are, religions out there that were created by the same people that run the world. And I don't really want to get into the conspiratorial side of things, because I want to talk about more of the solutions. But we have to accept that the fact that there is a small group of people that are running this world and have guided us into their way of living, and we don't want that no more. And we can only realize that once we realize our own power, we can start making changes in the relevant changes that we need to do. Because these religions, certain religions that are out there, have been purposely to separate us, and the difference between religions and the mystical traditions that we've been talking about, that I've only just touched upon. The mystical traditions always talk about the law of one. It is all oneness. And the English language that we speak, there's so many references about being one. And that's what we've got to get back to. And you're correct in saying absolutely everything in this world, in this universe, and nature is seeking a balance We are seeking that balance. Now, we can either make it worse for ourselves or we can quicken that balance process up. We just got to stop doing the stuff that makes us suffer. You know, I'm going to be talking about a lot about words, because we have to be careful about the words that we use. The English language was very carefully constructed. Absolutely, if anybody studied the topic of etymology, where the origins of words and how words are put together, it would absolutely knock your socks off. And it's been unbelievably controlled. We cast spells on ourselves. That's what the word spelling means, like to spell a word. Words cast spells. That's why it's called spelling, and we have to be careful with the words that we use because we trap ourselves with that. We have to really talk in a positive manner. It makes such a difference. But all of this knowledge that is out there, you know, whether it's religion, whether it is mystical traditions, they're all exoteric knowledge. It's on the outside of us. But a lot of these mystical traditions will bring you back to yourself. Yeah. So in the exoteric, it's intended for, or, likely to be understood by the general public. Now, the controllers of the world, want us to be like hive-minded, and to follow their footsteps. So they will put out certain knowledge out there for the public. So it's popular amongst the public, relating to the outside world, external. And if you break down the word external, it comes from Greek exoterikos. It means outer, outside, which is all very well. Even these mystical traditions, they're very, very good knowledge, and they're very, very deep knowledge. But the point is to get back to yourself. So we seek the well, I would say the religion is more exoteric, but the mystical traditions is a bit more esoteric. So it's a bit more internal, because it teaches you about human consciousness and introspective work, and it gets you inside your brain. So it's intended for for the few to be understood, and this is where the dark occults have had this knowledge, kept it for themselves, and used it as a weapon with society. Now, it's still very easily obtainable now, this knowledge in these days. It's just been kept under wrap for thousands of years. But it's for a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interests. So esoteric comes from the Greek word esoterikos, within and into. So this is what we're encouraging people to do. So the mystical traditions will teach you more to go inside, and eventually once you learn that knowledge and you apply it to your lives, you get to the truth, and you are that truth. That goes way deeper than the mystical traditions. And if you look at the word truth, you can see that the letter U is in the middle of it, because you are the center of truth. That's when you get to oneness. That's when you get to God, the creator, whatever you want to call it, the most high, universe, infinite intelligence. You want to strip away the illusion of Maya, because that's everything that's going on in the world. It's all an illusion. And you get back to yourself. The truth is you. All the old traditions, you'll see the yogis, they always talked about this stillness. And that is the closest you will ever get to God. That is the closest you will ever get. And that's what we should be seeking for. And you can obviously tie that into the Buddha, John.
Yeah, George. Mm. Yeah, I mean, you've said it really well. It's an interesting, how I was thinking about stillness, actually. Even the Quakers talk about the small, silent, or still voice within. You know, yeah, this stillness. It's very, very difficult to be still and quiet in the modern world that we live in. Um, it's, I would say, very, very few people are actually able to do it. And it's not necessarily about being in a quiet place, but stopping and not feeling the need to do anything is incredibly difficult. And it's something that I'm a very active person, you know. Me and my partner talk about this all the time, how she's actually has a slower pace than me. And I'm kind of rushing around a lot to try and do things, to do as much as I can in a certain space of time, you know. And that's interesting because what do I miss by being so quick at stuff? Doing things. So this stillness, I'd say it's one of my natural tendencies to not be still. But certainly when I'm the type of person, I have to kind of commit to something and I do it. So like when I meditate, I probably meditate every other day. I find it challenging to sit there and have a still mind. But I also know it's like really good for me, and it's this talking about the Maya, is cutting out the illusion. And that's incredibly difficult when we were talking about this last week about attachment. And this is part of what the Buddha talked about is like this non-attachment. It's not being, fearful of not having anything to do, to say, etc., etc. George, I love to talk. And one of the things that's kept coming up recently is silence, right? And I don't think that's just verbal silence. I think it's about, I really need to go within and, be still within myself more. So, yeah, this non attachment thing, it kind of connects with this stillness, very important for us if we want to actually be liberated from things happening to us. Learning to be still is a really great tool to have to deal with that. Because when a moment comes up in your life which is challenging, you can go to stillness and you've always got it there, and then that thing it loses its, it loses its strength or its ferocity. So, yeah, Buddhism, it recognizes these really interesting principles, and I think that'd be cool if we could talk about that. The principles, the Hermetic principles. I looked into them a little bit earlier, and some of them really do resonate with the kind of laws, taught by the Buddha. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, George?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the Hermetic principles is, yeah, there's 7 basic ones, and there is an 8th one. It's called the Lost Principle. But I'll go through this because it would all come under the Hermetic principles, and Hermetic principles came from Hermes Trismegistus. So he's the thrice great one, as he was referred to in the ancient Greek mystery traditions. He was considered as one of the messengers of God, one of the messengers of gods. He brought, he was the one that brought the wisdoms of the gods down to humanity in the ancient Egyptian and Cometian traditions. He was described of the god known as Thoth. He had other incarnations as well, but with the Hermetic traditions are named as such because they are hermetically sealed, like natural law is, like the binding principles that are immutable. You just cannot change them. They exist in this world, in this universe, and all planes and all dimensions. So, in order, they are the general principles of natural law, the principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, and the principle of rhythm, and the principle of cause and effect, which is a very important one. The two very important ones are the principles of correspondence and the principles of principle of cause and effect. And you also have the principle of gender. So they are natural law. Let's put the word natural. So it's inherent in nature. If you look at the word natural, it says nature all, because everything is nature. Nature all. Give me 2 seconds, John. I have to cut this bit out because my computer's just gone a bit funny. Oh, for God's sake.
What's happening, Jules?
My computer's just gone a bit funny. 2 seconds. Oh, for goodness sake. Where is it? You'd have to just cut this bit out. I'll just give me 2 seconds. Sorry about this. Fuck's sake, where's it gone? Right, cut that bit out, just that space, but I'll go back into breaking down the word natural law. So even if we go back to natural, the word natural, it's inherent, it's having a basis in nature, reality, and truth, and it's not made by humankind. And the law is an existing condition which is binding and immutable. You just cannot change it. And if we go deeper into the first principle, the principle of mentalism. Now, this is a very, very important principle to understand because I talk about this a lot. Everything is mind. The all is mind, and the universe is mental. I always explain to people that there's nothing external in the world. We see everything from our brain. Everything is actually internal, and it's going to be a very, very hard concept for people to wrap their heads around because they're so used to seeing the separateness. The separateness is an illusion because it's all one, but the separateness has to be there because there are lessons. This is how the universe has created the whole world. There are lessons, and we learn and we grow and evolve. So thoughts lead to the manifestation of things and events. It's the very first stages. Thoughts create our state of existence and the quality of our experience here on earth. And so we have to be responsible for everything that we create by being responsible for everything that we think about. We have to do the real introspective work and be careful. Are we berating ourselves? Because that's one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves. And we do that. We have to be aware. And then the second is the law of correspondence. This is the second of the seven universal principles: as above, so below; as below, so above. And this means that there is harmony, agreement, and correspondence between physical, mental, and spiritual realms. There is no separation in absolutely anything. Everything in the universe, including us, like that I explained last time, that we are all fractals. It originates from the one source. We originate from the one source. And the same pattern is expressed in all planes of existence, from the smallest electron to the largest star and vice versa. All is one. And when we get our head around that, our life really changes. Okay. As I mentioned last week, the ancient Greek temple of Apollo at Delphi was referring to this great law of correspondence in the inscription: Know thyself, and thou shalt know all the mysteries of the gods in the universe. So it's a really, really important principle. So it's everything to do with the macro, the very large things, the totality, and the microcosm, the very small things. We are individual units of consciousness that comprises the whole. We are the micro, but we are also the macro, and they are just reflections of each other. And as I said, the universe is holographic. It is self-similar across all scales. It's scientifically proven as well. And then you've got the third principle, is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves, everything vibrates at the most fundamental level. The universe and everything which comprises it is pure vibratory energy manifesting itself in different ways. This is why I say the universe is having an experience with itself, because it's manifested in everything. Everything you see comes from the universe. The universe has no solidity as such. Matter is merely energy in a state of vibration. So if you look at a table and you think that's solid, it's not. So even if we go back to natural, the word natural, it's inherent. It's having a basis in nature, reality, and truth, and it's not made by humankind. And the law is an existing condition which is binding and immutable. You just cannot change it. And if we go deeper into the first principle, the principle of mentalism. Now, this is a very, very important principle to understand, because I talk about this a lot. Everything is mind. The all is mind, and the universe is mental. I always explain to people that there's nothing external in the world. We see everything from our brain. Everything is actually internal, and it's going to be a very, very hard concept for people to wrap their heads around, because they're so used to seeing the separateness. The separateness is an illusion, because it's all one. But the separateness has to be there because there are lessons. This is how the universe has created the whole world. There are lessons, and we learn and we grow and evolve. So thoughts lead to the manifestation of things and events. It's the very first stages. Thoughts create our state of existence and the quality of our experience here on earth. And so we have to be responsible for everything that we create, by being responsible for everything that we think about. We have to do the real introspective work and be careful. Are we berating ourselves? Because that's one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves. And we do that. We have to be aware. And then the second is the law of correspondence. This is the second of the seven universal principles: as above, so below; as below, so above. And this means that there is harmony, agreement, and correspondence between physical, mental, and spiritual realms. There is no separation in absolutely anything. Everything in the universe, including us, like that I explained last time, that we are all fractals. It originates from the one source. We originate from the one source. And the same pattern is expressed in all planes of existence, from the smallest electron to the largest star and vice versa. All is one. And when we get our head around that, our life really changes. Okay. As I mentioned last week, the ancient Greek temple of Apollo at Delphi was referring to this great law of correspondence in the inscription: Know thyself, and thou shalt know all the mysteries of the gods in the universe. So it's a really, really important principle. So it's everything to do with the macro, the very large things, the totality, and the microcosm, the very small things. We are individual units of consciousness that comprises the whole. We are the micro, but we are also the macro, and they are just reflections of each other. And as I said, the universe is holographic. It is self-similar across all scales. It's scientifically proven as well. And then you've got the third principle is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves, everything vibrates at the most fundamental level. The universe and everything which comprises it is pure vibratory energy manifesting itself in different ways. This is why I say the universe is having an experience with itself, because it's manifested in everything. Everything you see comes from the universe. The universe has no solidity as such. Matter is merely energy in a state of vibration. So if you look at a table and you think that's solid, it's not. If you go look at it under a microscope, you'll see that all the electrons, the tiny little atoms are just going nuts. They're everywhere, and that's also not an easy concept for people to get, but that is truth and scientifically proven. And then you've got the law of polarity. Now, this is very important to understand. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, and opposites are identical in nature, but they're different in degrees. Okay, but extremes meet, but it's all still one, and all paradoxes have to be reconciled. We live in this duality world because there's so much to learn from the darkness comparing it to the light. There's so much right and wrong in the world. We get to compare it and we can see what's right and what's wrong. Without that duality, you can't sit here blissful for a trillion years in a one state, because we wouldn't learn anything. So the principle of polarity is very, very important. That's why the yin and yang is very important. The sacred masculine and the divine feminine, they're two seemingly opposing energies, but they're not. They are one. But we will learn so much from them. And then you've got the law of rhythm, like you mentioned before. Everything flows and out and in. Everything has tides, and all things will rise, all things will fall. It's the pendulum swing that manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. That everybody has ups and downs in their lives, and this is where it's extremely important to balance out. Do the things that balance you out. Going out into nature will balance you out. Working making compost, doing anything with nature, playing a musical instrument. Do what you can to balance yourself out. But it is a part of nature. We want to be in the rhythm with the earth and the universe. So we've got another important one, which is the law of cause and effect. Plane. This is the plane of effects. This is the physical world. This is where the manifested realities are formed due to their underlying causes. The plane of effects constitutes that which has already occurred. So as such, there's no power to affect change no power to affect change lies here. You can't change it anymore. It's done. That is the truth, because that which has already occurred cannot unoccur. It has become that truth. We have manifested that with our thoughts, and human consciousness seems to be trapped on looking on the plane of effects, and then we react to that effect on the outside world, and it keeps going round in the circles. We have to get to the root cause. So humanity as a whole, unfortunately, remains ignorant of the underlying causes which they themselves set in motion and which lead to self-inflicted suffering in their lives. And as a society, we suffer because we always look at the external world. Um, and another way of looking at it is when one event causes another to happen, the cause is always why it happens, and the effect is what happens. I think that what we've got to understand is that in complex situations, right, cause and effects are often distant in time and space. Always there's always time between the karmic consequences. Okay, sometimes there is instant karma, but it's the universe that decides at the end of the day what that lesson will be, you know. But it's also important to think of karma as not bad all the time. If you do good, that good will come back to you. You know, if you do something bad, you know, get ready, brace yourselves. The universe will give you harsh lessons, and this is it. We need to understand the difference between right and wrong. We have to stop lying. We have to stop stealing. We have to stop cheating. We have to stop, complying to unjust laws. You know, um, and then the last principle is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has a masculine and feminine principle, and this gender manifests on all plane. It's in everything. Electrons, nothing can exist without these two polarities. The gender has to exist in everything. It's how creation is done. It's such an important thing to understand. But if you want a more in-depth explanation of all the principles, as I say, watch the Mark Passio 8.5 hour presentation, because he goes into very much in depth. He could probably do a whole presentation on just the principle of gender. It's that important. It's all to do with creation. But John, you can identify with the principle of cause and effect, because the Buddha really understood the karma very well. So if you can just add on to that, please, as well.
Yeah, sure, George. Well, it's interesting, this cause and effect thing. So there's a kind of a principle in the Buddhism that I practice, and what was actually revealed in the Lotus Sutra. And the lotus flower is used as a metaphor for this principle, is that a lotus flower will produce seed and flowers at the same time. You know, it's there's not many of these plants that do this, and that illustrates the core of laws and cause and effect, simultaneity of cause and effect. So it's like, as soon as you make a cause, the effect already happens in the universe. The effect happens immediately. But because we live in these different dimensions, it doesn't manifest into the external 3D world straight away. Sometimes it does. I mean, you drop something and it hits the ground, right? That's cause and effect. You've dropped it, it hits the ground, and that's acting under different laws of force, etc. But you might say something to someone, and they don't react straight away. It takes a little time for them to react because you're saying it to a person. So you make the calls, which is the external manifestation. And this is where it gets interesting, is that's an effect of what you're thinking. So the cause is the thought, and what you say is the effect. That then becomes a cause, and it creates an effect on that person. Now that person might have an external reaction or effect to that by punching you in the face or by reacting verbally. And now, obviously, when that thing's said to that person themselves will have an internal effect, and then they'll have an internal cause. And then however they perceive the world determines what their reaction will be, what the effect is, right? Because some people will cry, something offensive is said to them. Some people will punch them. Some people will react verbally. Some people will be like, what are you trying to achieve by saying this thing to me? So the interesting thing about how Buddhism looks at cause and effect is, when you're talking about living beings, especially human beings, is the effect that can happen from a cause. Well, it's infinite, depending on the karma of that person that it happens to, and the relationship they have with that person that's saying it to them, and how they both perceive the world, right? Their interpretation, if they, this is why we see people reacting in the way they react to global events that threaten us. People react in different ways, depending on lots of different things, like how they got raised or what they think they're going to lose if they, stand up against tyranny, for instance. And this is the interesting thing, is like, this is where the karma comes in, is like how one person reacts to a situation and another person reacts to a situation is completely different. So there's these cause and effect is like an infinite thing that's constantly happening within nature, as you said, within, in the microcosmic world, all the atoms are bouncing off each other and interacting. So you've got that level of cause and effect, and then you've got the cause and effect of the sun on our planet. It's insane. It truly is. There's only a couple people, I know there's a theoretical physicist that has explained this microcosmic to the macrocosmic and cause and effect. His name's Nassim Haramein. And I watched him about a decade ago. And he actually worked out a mathematical theory for it, which is amazing. Not that I'm necessarily interested in understanding that, but it's, but there's certain things that you can never explain by maths. And it's, when we talk about laws of cause and effect, it's not like you just need to study that, but it's, you feel it in your life. You can feel when something comes to you, like, a good effect from something you've done, and you're like, yeah, and you can also feel it, on the other side of things, when you might have acted out of fear or ignorance, and you either get a feeling or something actually appears in your environment. So the thing I've done over my last 15 years is used an object called a gohonzon, and it's a scripture. It's Chinese calligraphy, which is depicting a particular event which is about the Buddha's enlightenment. So when I look at that and I chant, the idea is that allows me to focus whilst I'm saying a mantra and observe my mind, observe what it is that comes up, and it's a really good way to understand or get into this kind of these laws of cause and effect, because you can use it as an instrument to go back over your day and be like, oh, that's why that happens, so when you've been doing this for some time, you start to kind of really be able to, it's like any art, you're trying to hone your art all the time. And it's a great way to be able to live your life, because the more conscious you become of these laws, like the laws of cause and effect, the easier it is to navigate through the world. It's like, if you're trying to get somewhere without a map, it's going to take a much longer time. But if you've got a map, depending on how exact it is or how, precise it is, it's, it's a lot easier. So, yeah, really interesting things, that we're talking about, man. Love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's always important at the end of the day to have a reflect on the day, understand the cause and effect, look back, the main principle to understand in natural law is don't cause any harm, don't cause any loss to anyone. We have free will. Free will is, it's such a beautiful gift that we've been given by the creator. And so, we can either make it a better world for ourselves and everyone, or we can make it a world that's even worse for everyone. We have to understand as well that karmic consequences is not only individual, it's collective. You're putting it all through the universe, and it will manifest. And that's why we have this control over us. That's why there is a system that we live in. We live in this kind of system where it is controlled, and a lot of people can't see that it's controlled. They actually believe that we need people to govern us because they can't govern themselves, and that's an erroneous belief structure. We were always meant to be self-governed and sovereign and live as self-dominion. But the reason why it has happened that way is because we haven't been following natural law. We haven't understood and human consciousness, and we have suffered as a humanity and individually. We have suffered completely. So it's a beautiful subject. We've only just touched the surface of these. There's a very good book called The Kabbalion. I don't know if I mentioned it last time. It goes into natural law and the principles even deeper than what I have done today. But it's just to give a gist to people and how important that it is, because we are the ones that can create a better world by using natural law and stopping our own suffering. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow, but we have created the world that we live in, and that's the bitter pill that people don't want to swallow. We have created the world that we live in, but we can also change it back to harmony, back to oneness when we share this knowledge and we share it from the goodness of our heart. We don't want any money, we don't want anything about it. We just care about the state of the world. We care about people, and we just want to get people to get back to themselves. The truth, the center of truth is you, and that is not by accident. The words are in the clues are in the words all the time. So I think that was a very good podcast, John. I think people can go out of their way to look into it deeper. And then we'll probably go on to another subject next week, folks. We're going to go into the grand solar minimum, and we're going to go into depths of what that is and what that involves, because we have gone into a grand solar minimum. This will affect the growing of our food and the food security. So there's a lot to look forward to on our podcast. We're going to make it quite diverse as much as possible. Because there's a lot to learn, and it's all to do with regenerative living. We have to change the way that we that we live our lives, and through the hard times that are coming, we can still potentially thrive out of those times.
Yeah, nice one, George. Nice outro. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, George. And I hope you enjoyed it. And tune in next time. Bye-bye.
Pond 5.